In this video I'm going to show you how to make boulders, and it's a lot of fun, but it's a little bit messy. So you may want to put on a nice apron. You can see mine's messy from years of making boulders. And we're going to need some rubber gloves and a place that's easy to clean up. I'm going to be working on this. This surface is actually vinyl, floor vinyl. So it's not quite as tough as a countertop. A countertop is a little bit more durable. And I've made many boulders on this surface, and it's not too much worse for wear. If you're making boulders more often than once a month, you should consider buying a piece of vinyl and not using your countertop to make boulders. Because if you do this on your countertop often, more than once a month, you're going to ruin your countertop, and that's no good. Anyway, I begin with a section of newspaper, and this is a thin section of newspaper. It's got 3 pages, and so you can see 2 pages are attached to each other, and one of the pages is separate. And we're going to need to separate. We need 3 separate pages, so I'm just going to tear this in half, just like that. So I've got 3 sheets of newspaper here, and that's going to make one boulder. And I always make more than one boulder at a time because it's messy. It's messy, so it's just worth making more than one at a time if I'm going to clean up the mess. So here's my paper for a second boulder, like that. Okay, and I'm ready to get started. And I put on rubber gloves, and I'm putting on gloves. I should say latex gloves. I'm putting on latex gloves not because the solution I'm working with is toxic or anything, but just because it's messy, and the latex gloves save a lot of time in cleanup. You can recycle your latex gloves just by washing your hands with them on and leaving them to dry for a while, and then use some talcum powder to put them on the next time you use them. So we're set to get started. I want to shake up my Ikebana solution, and that looks pretty good. And you'll notice I've got a nice wide bowl and a nice wide brush, so that I'll be able to move a lot of solution quickly, hopefully without making too big a mess. And I pour my solution into the bowl. Any leftover solution I can pour back into my container afterwards. And so now I begin. And I want to put a layer of rolling solution out here that's roughly the size of my sheet of newspaper. So I'm just going to lay down a layer, just like that. And I put 1 sheet of newspaper in it. And now I'm going to completely saturate that sheet of newspaper with the solution, just like this. Okay, and I don't need to worry about air bubbles right now. There's an air bubble right here. I don't really need to worry about those right now. What I'm looking for are spots that don't have any solution, that haven't been saturated. And now I use my brush just to lift up the corner of the paper and flip it. You notice I have to use 2 hands. And now I'm gonna be a little bit more concerned about air bubbles. The first thing I want to do is make sure that the paper is completely saturated with rolling solution. And once I've confirmed that, I want to make sure that there are no air bubbles underneath. And then I lift a corner up again, and I fold my sheet in half. It's like this. Okay, and this is kind of a not good fold. So let me try that again. What I want is a good curl so that air bubbles don't get trapped. See, I've got a better curl than I had last time. And now I can just flatten that fold out. The folds for this aren't critical. They won't be seen but I'm a stickler for folds. So anyway, now we fold in half in this direction, just like that. And I do the same thing. I want to get the air bubbles out. And then we're going to fold in half one more time, just like this. So there's one square, or kind of square, ready to go. And I'm going to do the rest of my sheets of paper, and I'll be right back. So now I've rolled 2 stacks of newspaper to make boulders with. And I'll show you on the first stack. I'll just fold the corners to the center. We do this, we fold all these outside corners to the center so that the paper edges won't be visible in our finished boulder. The one thing that really gives away the fact that it's paper are edges, seeing edges. So I even fold in the corners created by folding in those first corners. And now I need to hold down these corners. The paper's getting very thick. I need to hold down these corners as I fold the other corners in. And I flip the boulder. And now I just want to sort of create a shape here. I squeeze the paper together. And I want to push as much. I'm putting a good amount of pressure on. I want to get as much fluid out of my boulder as possible. The more fluid you can get out of the boulder, the less time it'll take to cure. And at the same time, I want to create some crevices, some indentations where I can put a plant or two. So you'll notice on this boulder that my edges are all rounded. That there's almost no paper showing, individual sheets of paper, or edges of paper showing. And I've got several crevices and little nooks where I can put plants. And I'm just going to put this in a pan that's going to go into the car, parked in the hot sun, to cure. And now I'm going to do the second one in exactly the same way. No 2 boulders are alike. You can vary the way you fold these edges in, but you should always make sure that the edges are folded towards the center like this. It's when you have those edges sticking out that people can really tell immediately that it was paper that you used. These boulders take a while to cure. I live in the Northeast in the United States, in the northeastern United States. And it can take, in the wintertime, it can take 3 or 4 sunny days for a boulder to completely cure. I'm going to do this boulder a little bit different shape. And I'm going to put a crevice right there. Let's get some of this fluid out. You know, you can make rounded shapes, or you can make or you can make curvy shapes. It doesn't really matter, or round or curvy with hard corners. However you want to do it is fine. So this has some interesting details on the side, and it's a little bit taller. I guess I'm happy with it. That's a little bit. Actually, I'm going to put an indentation up here, like that. So I don't know what I'll end up planting in this boulder, but it looks good to me. And again, that just goes into the pan. So now these are going to go into my car, parked in the hot sun to cure. And I should have said, on a summer day, these will cure much more quickly. In the summertime, when we've got temperatures that are around 90 degrees outside and a sun that's high in the sky, I can cure this size boulder in about 3 hours with the windows closed in my car, because the car temperature is going to get up inside the car. The temperature is probably going to rise to about 120 degrees. So they cure pretty quickly. Right now it's the spring, and these will take a day and a half to cure with sunny skies. So now I've got two boulders that have dried, and I can tell they're dry because they make kind of a funny or a hard sound when I tap them, and they feel warm to the touch or room temperature to the touch. They definitely don't feel cold like the surface feels cold. So I'm pretty sure that they're dry. And I have prepared a mixture. This is 1 part artist medium and 1 part burnt umber. And this is about 5 parts of water. And I also have a glove. And you'll notice I'm wearing a cleaner apron. This is not as messy as making the boulder was. I should say there's a temptation to put boulders in the oven to dry, and that probably should be avoided. If you set the oven on its lowest setting, it will work, but it can leave burn marks even at the oven's lowest setting, and it's really not a good idea. Anyway. So we're going to add a finish to these boulders using this mixture. So I need to make sure that I mix my 1:1 to 5 ratio here pretty carefully. And you'll notice that I'm using a brush that's got fairly long bristles, and that's to make sure that I get in all the nooks and the crannies of my boulder. This is a pretty dilute mixture. And I think we're ready to get started here. So I just take that mixture and I very generously cover my boulder with it. We want a sort of a translucent finish. So we use a lot of this on the first coat just to make sure we completely cover the boulder on the first coat. And I need to make sure I get in all these little nooks and crannies, and like this area underneath here. And I also need to make sure that I don't allow any pooling. I don't want layers of this stuff to build up. And I flip my boulder, and I'm just going to add some more solution around the edges of the bottom. And that's and I'm going to paint areas that I missed when I was doing the top, because you'll always find a lot of areas under here that you missed in the initial painting. But I paint an inside edge here, just in case it shows. Just like that. Get these edges. And so now what I do is I sort of inspect my work, making sure that I don't have any buildups of paint, any pooling, because that'll make it look different. And you'll notice that we can still see the newsprint very clearly on the surface of our boulder, and that's actually going to it's going to add another visual element to the piece. You'll see that actually ends up making it look pretty cool. This one's got even more newsprint shapes left over on it, and so I worked the color in here too. And after I finish this one, I'm going to leave them to dry until they're quite dry. I would say at least an hour, maybe 2 hours tops. I've looked at the color I've achieved here, and it's not quite as dark as I'd like it to be. So I've made a mixture that's a little bit thicker, 1 part Van Dyke brown, 1 part artist medium, and about 3 or 4 parts water. So it's going to be a little bit thicker mixture. And I'm going to show you this technique, this rubbed finish technique. You need to make sure you've got a paper towel available. And the basic idea is to put a lot of the color onto the stone, onto the paper, and then to rub it, basically rub it off. And so we put just a generous helping of this color onto the surface. We want to cover the entire surface with this color, like this. You'll notice I'm using a fair amount of it because I need to make sure it gets in these nooks and crannies. And so that's probably pretty good. You'll notice I'm working fairly quickly too. And now we want to just rub the surface, and you'll see as I'm rubbing this that pools get left behind. When it starts pooling too much, I get the excess material off my fingers and onto the paper towel. And I just continue rubbing. And what this does is it leaves a buildup of color in the nooks and crannies, and less color on the flat areas. And for whatever reason, that adds this sort of complexity that makes our stone look much stonier. So I'm pretty much done here. I'm just inspecting to make sure I don't have any pooled up material. And you'll notice, in these nooks and crannies, that I've got a fair amount of color in there, whereas on the flat areas there's a lot less color. And now I'll let that dry for about an hour. So this is my finished brown chert boulder. And I think it looks really nice. It's got a little bit of a glossy finish, and it's got a lot of color variation, especially with the newsprint visible underneath. And you'll also notice there's a lot of places where I can put plants in this piece. So I think overall it's a great success.